Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Hilaal Live. My name is Firas Patel. I would like to thank you, the few, for staying with us. I'm, of course, beginning Hilaal Live today. So from 8 o'clock, Lukman will be taking over. So let us, of course, start off on what has been a busy week, but we turn our attentions to Tuesday when South Africa's official unemployment rate had breached the 32% mark again, following the recent job losses in the fourth quarter of last year. Unemployment increased to 32.1% in the fourth quarter, up from 31.9% in the previous one. Stats released the quarterly labor force survey on Tuesday. Joining us now to discuss this, I'd like to welcome Stats SA Labor Statistics Director Desiree Manamela. Desiree, good day. Thank you so much for joining us on Hilaal Live.
Good day for us. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Desiree, the last time I spoke to you, a little bit of optimism we had, of course, that figure of 31.9%. A tough one, wasn't it? I mean, just talk to us about that, the fact that it has breached that 32.1%, gap, which I think as South Africans were hoping not to get to.
Yeah, I guess everybody was not hoping to see that number. But in the fourth quarter, we counted, and this is the results that we published on Tuesday, where we see employment declining by 22,000 to 16.7 million, and unemployment increasing by 46,000. The results of the two indicators, unemployment increasing, employment declining, resulted into a 32.1% unemployment rate.
Let's talk about some of the jobs, obviously, that got which kind of suffered the most. I mean, community and social services. One would have thought that wouldn't have been one of them, but I mean, they shed quite a lot. I mean, the number sitting at around 170,000. I mean, maybe you could correct me on that, but it's quite a large number, isn't it, Desiree?
Yeah, that is true. Community and social services, remember, it includes public administration and defense, it includes education, it includes health and social work, and other community and social and personal services as well. Now, during the fourth quarter, we saw a decline of about 171,000 when we compare with the previous quarter 3 of 2023. And the main contributors to this decline in community and social services is education, one, whereby education lost about 231,000 jobs when we compare with the previous quarter, which is quarter 3 of 2023. We also saw some decreases in public administration and defense activities, which basically lost about 58,000 when we compare with the previous quarter. And also, when we look at construction also lost about 36,000 jobs. And this was mainly from building installations and then site preparation by sub-industries, which lost about 61,000 and 30,000 respectively. And going down, we're also looking at agriculture. Agriculture lost about 35,000 jobs. And when we look at which sub-industries of agriculture that lost employment, we are looking at farming of animals, which lost about 37,000, as well as growing of crops, which lost about 9,000 jobs. And trade in the previous period, we used to see some creation in employment in the fourth quarter because of the casual jobs that are created because of the festive season. And this quarter 4 of 2023, we saw trade losing 28,000 jobs. And if you go down into determining which sub-industries of trade lost employment, we see hotels and restaurants employment declining by 36,000. We see wholesale and commission trade declining by 22,000. However, within trade, we saw retail trade creating some employment. Yeah. And even though we saw some declines in employment, we saw some gains.
Yeah,
right?
I was
finance.
Yeah, please do carry on, Desiree. Yeah.
Should I continue?
Yeah, please do continue. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Yes, even though we saw some declines, we also saw some gains in employment, some increases. We saw finance creating employment. We saw transport and mining creating some employment.
Yeah, I want to ask about manufacturing, Desiree. I mean, it also got hit quite hard. But 1,000, I mean, that was the number of
Yeah.
jobs that were lost in manufacturing. I mean, if there is a slight light at the end of the tunnel in terms of that part of the unemployment figures, it would be manufacturing, isn't it?
I think I could say that, I mean, manufacturing is one of the industries that in the previous process they were trying to create some employment. And when we look at the fourth quarter, it is the one that contributed less to the decline by that 1,000 decline in terms of employment. And in terms of the percentage contribution to the declines, it's about like basically not much that was, created in the fourth quarter. And in terms of what can we see going forward, it's something that we'll have to wait for the next first quarter of 2024 to see how these industries have basically performed compared to the fourth quarter. I mean, some industries, they will perform badly during the fourth quarter. However, when we move to the new year and people start looking for jobs, people start to get into employment in the first quarter, because fourth quarter also has its own issues. Then we see changes in different industries, whereby you find that some of the industries are creating employment, some of the industries are losing employment because of one quarter from the other. So that's something that when we look at the first quarter, it's something that we will see in the first quarter of 2024, whether manufacturing has improved or employment declined in manufacturing. So it's something that we will have to wait and see in the next quarter.
Desiree, I want to look at some of the industries that were in the positive. You mentioned finance up by 128,000. That's quite a
Yes.
good number. I mean, transport 57,000. One could take into account, of course, many South Africans wanting to go home for the festive season. But mining, it was a surprise. I don't know if it was a surprise to you in Stats SA, but 37,000 jobs for the final quarter of the year. I mean, that's quite a big number, isn't it? Surprise, no surprise with regards to that part of the sector of the economy?
I think as a statistician, I get surprised a lot, and I don't get surprised. It's
Yeah.
it's either way. But I mean, mining, yes, created 37,000 in the fourth quarter, right? However, when we look at which industries or which sub-industries of mining created that employment, we are looking at coal mining and lignite, and mining and quarry not elsewhere classified. So meaning the other gold, platinum, iron ore, they employment there declined, but the main ones that contributed to this increase, it's mainly coal and lignite, and mining and quarrying that is not elsewhere classified when we classify our industries.
I want to look at the provincial numbers, Desiree. Eastern Cape, I mean, they've got still quite a high number, 111,000. Limpopo sitting at 40,000. So you could see that part of South Africa, that province of South Africa, still recording quite a high number of unemployment figures there. And I think, I don't want to discuss the political aspects with regards to that, but that's a huge number, isn't it? I mean, that accounts for quite a significant portion of the unemployment numbers within South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, Eastern Cape and Northwest.
Yes.
When you look at the unemployment rate of Eastern Cape and Northwest, it has been high. For example, if you look at how it was in the previous quarter compared to this quarter, we find that Northwest, their expanded unemployment rate was about 52.2%. And this is basically saying that in the Northwest, we have more people that are discouraged. And as much as people are looking for jobs, but we have more people that are discouraged, that are not looking for jobs, but they're available to take up a job. And Eastern Cape also, we have about 47% unemployment rate when we use the expanded unemployment rate. Now, I mean, the jobs declined in Northwest, the jobs declined in most of the provinces. But provinces and when you look at the data, most of the rural provinces, they have the highest expanded unemployment rate. which basically means that we have more discouraged people in the rural provinces compared to the urban provinces. The urban provinces, I'm talking about Western Cape and Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, for example. I mean, Western Cape and Gauteng, they have the smallest expanded unemployment rate. The Western Cape is showing an unemployment rate of 25.6%. And if you look at the data also, we find that Western Cape has the highest absorption rate, which basically means that the proportion of the working age population in the Western Cape that is employed is at over 50%. So people are being absorbed into employment compared to compared to the other provinces. So yeah, it's like that. So that's what we are seeing when we look at the data.
The youth also, Desiree, quite a bit of an increase there, 44.3% in the final quarter. And I mean, they still
Yeah.
remain vulnerable in the market, don't they? And I mean, you've been collecting the stats. We saw a bit of an uptake, but of course, that final quarter just not maybe in favor of those age 15 to 34 years.
Yeah. I mean, we have the 15 to 24 years and the 25 to 34 years. That's our two categories of youth. Now, if you look at the youth 15 to 24, they have been recording the highest unemployment rate, and they continue to have the highest unemployment rate, which is about 59.4% in the current quarter. And those that are 25 to 34, they have an unemployment rate of 39%. And when you look at the participation into the labor market, they still have the lowest participation rate in terms of the labor market. And absorption rate as well, when you look at the absorption rate of the youth 25 to 34, it's standing at about 45.1%, while that one of those that are 15 to 24 is standing at 10.7%. So they have the highest unemployment rate and they have the lowest absorption rate and participation rate. So yes, it is correct to say that the youth are vulnerable. They have the highest unemployment rate, they have the lowest absorption rate and the lowest participation rate.
One final question, Desiree. 7.9 million people are currently jobless. Yesterday, Finance Minister Ino Godongwana said that obviously they're going to be tapping into the gold reserves to try and, mitigate the situation in terms of the economy of South Africa. The next time I speak to you, which will of course be very close to the elections, that'll be, after the first quarter of this year. Are you hoping, as Stats SA, that there could be at least a bit of an uptake in terms of employment, and what would need to happen with regards to that?
Paras, I think, in terms of our mandate, is basically to collect the data and give it to the policymakers to report on the numbers. And I guess what was said yesterday and what can happen with the numbers in the next quarter, it's something that we will have to wait for in the next quarter. But I think, we've seen the data. We see youth unemployment rate going up. We see women are being disadvantaged compared to men in terms of the labor market. We see certain industries in creating employment, some industries also losing employment. So it's basically said, the data is basically saying that more employment needs to be created. We need to see the absorption rate increasing. The absorption rate, if you look at the data, it has not surpassed what we've seen like about 10 years ago. We've seen participation rate is still just about to surpass what we've seen before COVID. So we need to see a lot of youth into employment. We need to see more youth not being discouraged, because when you look at the three indicators that we use for labor market, we have employment, we have unemployment, and we have those that are not economically active. Now, if we look at what we discussed on Tuesday, we realized that we have about 107,000 fewer discouraged work seekers. This basically means that people are now starting to move either to employment or to unemployment. Now, moving into unemployment, it means people are starting to participate into the labor market. They are starting to take a step to look for a job, and they have a better chance of getting into employment when they are looking than when they are discouraged. And yes, I mean, employment has surpassed the pre-COVID level of 16.4 million to 16.7 million. Yeah, so I think that's where I can stop.
I think hopefully, Desiree, the next time you and I speak, we'll have, I think, much more encouraging numbers in terms of
I hope
employment
so.
to talk about.
I
Desiree
hope so
Manamela,
too.
always a pleasure having you on Hilaal Live. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for us.
That's Desiree Manamela, South Africa's Labour Statistics Director. After the break, I'll have your latest in news, finance, and sports. Do stay tuned.